Hey guys, welcome to today's video, and today I have a really special episode for you. I want to talk to you about how to mix orchestral strings, especially orchestral strings within the context of a pop production. Some of you probably know that orchestral music, orchestras and strings in particular are one of my favorite subjects and one of my favorite things to mix as well. I would love to do a lot more of these kind of projects where I get to work with amazingly recorded strings, orchestral instruments, or even movie scores. I really enjoy working on movie scores as well. In today's video, I'll show you how I mix the strings in a song called Entre tu sombra y tu alma, composed by my amazing friends Josue and Ricardo. I think this is an amazing production, showcases really well how everything should be done if life was perfect. So let's do it. Okay, so let's jump right into Logic. I'll give you a quick rundown of the song as a whole first. I'll show you the individual elements, the drums, the bass, the vocals, and everything there is, and then we'll focus mostly on the strings today. You can have a listen at the full mastered version of the song in the link below, and for now I'll just give you a few snippets from the intro and the verse and the chorus. Let's have a look.
No sabes cuántas veces me seduce tu mirada, aún sin verme. No sabes cuántas noches he vuelto loca mi almohada por no tenerte aquí, acariciando mi ensueño, reviviendo mis ansias de estar entre tus brazos, entre tu sombra y tu alma, y navegar entre el silencio y la pureza de tu amor, entre tus besos, entre tu aliento y tu pasión, y respirar la vida que me quieras dar.
Okay, and let's have a listen at the louder section in the end as well.
Con mi vida entre tus brazos, tengo todo a mi favor.
Okay, so you get the idea. We have a lot of different elements in this mix, but let's just go through them as groups. So we have a whole bunch of drums made out of mostly samples. Actually, all of them are samples. And of course, as you can see, as the song progresses, more and more elements come in, so it becomes bigger and stronger. Towards the end, we have some additional snares and impacts. Then we have a whole bunch of more cinematic elements. So you have some of these really, really big and epic hits. Then also, of course, the bass. Which is just quite a simple synth, to be honest, and I think they made a good choice here, because anything more than this would have been overkill and really tough to fit. So here the bass really just delivers the very low end, kind of the rug, the foundation for the mix, because everything else will provide plenty of mid-range and plenty of treble. So you don't need a bass with a lot of treble or a lot of mid-range necessarily. I'm gonna skip the strings for now. We have a few more classical instruments. The piano was indeed recorded as well, actually. Let's see all of these. So these are more sound design elements, really. They are not particularly guitar-y guitars, even though it says guitar, but it's more like guitar pads. And then, of course, we have the vocal.
Reviviendo mis ansias de estar.
So quite a few elements. I'll take off all of these for the demonstration, except for the tape that can stay on. All right, so without all of this processing, let's have another quick listen to one section.
Colgado en tu ventana, por solo verte reír. Y es que si no estoy contigo, no me puedo.
Cool, and now let's jump into what we're actually here to talk about today. So as you can see, I have received the strings in a lot of tracks. I think about 40-50 tracks actually. We have separate cellos and bass instruments, we have violas, violins, and then we have, of course, the most important elements, which are the Decca Tree and an outer, also kind of a Decca Tree kind of setup. What is a Decca Tree? The Decca Tree is actually the main set of microphones that is used in every scoring studio. It is actually a triangle of microphones with one in the front and two in the back, like a normal triangle above the orchestra with certain distances and particular angles. It is meant to capture the orchestra as a whole, really giving you a really full picture of what it is. Let's have a listen to just the Decca Tree. So as you can see, we have the Decca Tree center, left and right, and they are arranged in a triangular fashion above the strings. Then we have a similar set of center, left, right, but these are outer, a bit further away. These give a bit more ambient sound. Let's have a look. So you can hear the difference. They're not as direct as the Decca Tree, but they still provide some useful information as a whole. Then we have a lot of spot mics, which I have put into separate groups. So we have a bunch of violins, 2 violin groups actually playing different melodies. It is very important that all of these were captured at the same time, okay? So the Decca Tree, the outer, and the spot mics were, of course, captured at the same time. This is one pass. Maybe they have done some edits and replaced certain sections, but always as a whole. So nothing has been overdubbed or replaced after. Then we have the violas. and cellos and basses. Okay, so first I will show you how this recording sounded without anything on it. For this, I'll just open the mixer and take off the few plugins that I've used on them. Let's have a listen at the strings as a whole from here. I mean, it should be quite clear that the recording quality and the performances, of course, are absolutely brilliant. So this was recorded in Budapest in a studio that is dedicated to recording orchestras, and they do this as a service. Actually, you can orchestrate your piece of music, you can write down the notes, and you can send them to the studio and they'll record it for you. So it's a really cool service that I definitely think a lot of people would benefit from. As you can see, I've done very little processing on the tracks individually. So if we open the individual tracks, there's actually nothing apart from panning and maybe a little bit of volume balancing. But even the volumes were so good that I had to do very, very little to it. So that's why I have put everything into groups and just treated the groups as a whole, of course, separately for each instrument. What I have done, however, and I think this is very important, I have done some additional editing. For instance, I have removed from the bass tracks every part where they're not actually playing, because I didn't want to have this additional bleed that might compromise the audio. So I have removed, as you can see, entire sections where, for instance, the contrabass wasn't playing. I've also removed a lot of the cellos here where they're not playing, just to get an even cleaner and leaner sound. Same is true for the violas. I've actually done some additional editing here to remove breaths and remove noises. Of course, when you have 40 people sitting in a studio, that will create a lot of noise. They're all breathing, they're all touching their instruments, they're all moving around on their chairs, especially in the silent sections here. So I had to get rid of those as well. Violins. And then, of course, the Decca Tree, which we have heard before. So my philosophy when mixing this was actually something I learned from some famous movie score mixers. I watched a lot of videos, I did a lot of reading before even starting this project. And what they usually do is that they use the Decca Tree as their main microphones, as their main source of sound, and they use the spot mics to support the Decca Tree in the end. So it's not like in metal or in other genres where you usually have the spot mics delivering most of the punch, most of the impact for the drums, for instance, and use the overheads in the rooms as a supplementary thing. No, here's quite the opposite. You use the kind of overheads, okay, the Decca Tree, to capture the sound as a whole and to deliver the sound as a whole, and then you use the spot mics as supplementary microphones. And of course, because the recording is so good, I knew from the very beginning that I would have to do very little and I would have to be very careful not to destroy anything that was recorded, to preserve the beauty of this recording and just enhance it as necessary and to maybe massage it a little bit to fit into what is a really, really, really huge arrangement. So I knew that there would be a lot of instruments, but I was also told by the artists themselves and by the producers that the strings would play the main role. The strings are here the heroes of this composition, so I knew I would have to feature them a lot. So my goal was here to really highlight the strings and then blend in everything else as almost supplementary instruments. Of course, in sections where there's no strings, I would have to make something else the hero, but overall, the strings are the hero of this song for sure. So let's have a look at some processing that I've done. So on the cellos and the basses, there's always very little going on. So there's always a tape just to smoothen out the edges a little bit. It also gives a little bit of a rounder bottom. We can quickly have a look. I mean, it does very little, but as a cumulative effect, it is still very nice to have, especially when you have it on more tracks. You know, I have it on multiple groups. It does do something really nice to the sound, but it's definitely not essential. It's definitely not necessary. On the EQ front, I'm using very, very smooth EQ curves. I'm using a little bit of a low cut because I knew that I would have a bass guitar, like a bass instrument, to deliver the really, really lows. I have bumped up the 100, especially on the cellos though and the basses here, removed a little bit of the 400 and boosted a lot of the 12K to give it some more presence. Let's have a listen. So this is also a very, very subtle change, I would say. And again, I have to repeat this. I'm not trying to change the sound significantly. I want to enhance it. I just want to boost what's good and reduce a little bit of what is bad in it. Of course, there's a lot of very little bad going on here. On the violas, I have the same approach. I have a tape and I have a bit more of an EQ. So here I have reduced some of the boxy 700 and used this. This is a Pultec emulation, by the way, a Pultec 12K. So this is a really wide boost around 12K that is really more like a tone control than it is an actual EQ. I think I've just copy-pasted these settings over to the the violins. No, I have boosted a little bit more of the 7K here as well. Let's have a listen. And here there was a bit of box at 900 and a bit of nose at 1.6, which I have reduced very little, as you can see, and boost a little bit at 12 and at 7K. Now for the most important part, the Decca Tree. Here what I've done is, let's have a look. Okay, a gentle low cut just to get rid of the rumble. Again, and this is very important to highlight. Let's have a look at this. So as you can see, there's a lot of rumble going on. All of this stuff from 0 to almost 50 Hertz is mostly air conditioning, buses and cars going outside the studio, maybe the tube going under the studio, airplanes, World War IV, whatever else it is. So all of this rumble is not necessary, and this is indeed an accumulative effect that happens from various different noise sources in all of these recordings. So again, we had a little bit of harshness here around 2K and a little bit of something around 300, a bit of mud that I reduced. Then again running into my tape, and then with the same EQ, just boosting the 12K again, a bit more of the 100 and a bit of reduction at 400. As you can see, and this is something you have to be really careful with, I have added a compressor to the Decca Tree just to keep it a little bit more even, because the dynamics of the performance were a bit too much, at least for a pop song. And I knew that later on I would also use a lot of automation, so I didn't want to give control over these dynamics purely to the musicians. I wanted to take a little bit back so I can manipulate the emotions, so I can manipulate the dynamics of the performance a little bit more, as it should be in the mix later on, so that it works better with the song, yeah. Then I've done, I think, copy-paste the same thing to the outer microphones. Let's have a look. Yes, indeed. And then, so I have all of these subgroups, which then all run into my bus 32, which is my strings group. So I also have everything, all of these are then going into this bus. Okay, well, I have yet one more layer of control. What do I have here? Okay, we can see that this happens a lot of times. So if you have a lot of instruments playing in a similar register or just similar tonalities, a lot of frequencies will usually build up. And on strings, 500, 1K, 2K, 3K are usually are kind of the usual suspects. There's always something that you have to do there. And indeed, there was a little bit of a whistle at around 500, which I reduced, and then, well, some basically meaningless 1 dB reduction at 1K. And again the low cut, but you can see that from the low cut below, from the low cut in the previous groups, there's already a lot cleaner low range here, so we don't have this huge bump of rumble anymore, which is again the air conditioning, the noise from outside, the people breathing, etc, etc. Then I'm running again into a tape, and then a tube tech EQ. I really like this EQ, it is really broad, it is very musical, and I'm just boosting a little bit more. It's set to 3. Now this is not really dBs, this is something else no one really knows, but I've set it to 3, so I have a little bit more of a treble boost. So just to massage the sound a little bit more. And then I'm running all of that into what is basically an LA2A kind of copy, but with more controls, set to slow attack, slow release. So just really gentle compression going on here. The goal here is just to glue things together, and with that I mean I want to bring the higher bits a little bit lower and the lower bits up a little bit. That's what compression does. So I can hear every note that is being played, and then later on with automation I can manipulate the thing as a whole. Okay, so now that we have covered EQ and a bit of compression and the grouping of the strings, let's have a look at what is actually the most important when it comes to this, which is the automation. And this is something that I can show you what I've done, but it's not something that you can just copy-paste into any session. So let's just highlight the strings, and I'm gonna hit A, and we'll see exactly how much automation is going on here. And all of this is playing a huge role in creating the feel and the vibe of this whole song. I've not only automated the volume of the strings as a whole, I've also automated for different sections, different parts of the group. So the outer, which is the more ambient kind of sound, I've reduced for certain parts which demanded a more intimate tone. The Decca Tree stayed consistent, and as that is the main kind of delivery vehicle for the strings. The violins, however, are going up and down, and I have even done some automation on the individual elements because, for instance, this section needed to be more heard, or here. And then also on the violas, I've done the same thing. So I've automated the viola group as a whole, as you can see here, but also on individual tracks, there's a little bit going on. On the cello and bass, I also wanted a couple of bumps in certain sections for instance, here and this one and the whole section over here. So as you can see, there's a lot going on, but it's not only volume. I've also automated a little bit of EQ, because what happens is when a string players, violinists especially, play harder, what happens is that harsh frequencies become more obvious. So I noticed that as they're playing in certain sections which are louder, there was a huge buildup around 2K, which I had to treat. So have a look at this. There's nothing, 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 and boom, we have 4 dB of reduction at exactly 2000 Hertz. And this makes a huge difference, and I'll show you later. And the same here, and that towards the end as well. So what I'm going to do now, because this is really difficult to highlight, although here I think the effect is very obvious, so I'm going to just select all of these, and I'm going to turn off the automation. So now let's have a listen to just the strings without any automation. Now let's have a listen at this section with the automation back on. Let's try this again because it's really subtle. Let's go again. Especially here, let's try this. Okay, that's very noticeable. That's quite an obvious difference in what's going on. It's just much more expressive and much more emotional here. Like, it's more dramatic. We have introduced a lot more drama into this with this little move. Let's have a look at another section here. What's going on? So clearly here I wanted the violas, this little bits, to be a bit more expressive. Let's see what it does with and without automation. Again, we can hear it's a lot more dramatic. It's subtle, but it's definitely there. And I think it's a very, very important difference, especially when you look at it in the context of the whole song. Now let's have a look at this EQ automation, what I've done, and what kind of difference we can hear in the sound. So let's have it with this change off first. So this is only, everything else stays on, but I've turned the EQ off. So So you can hear that there is this harshness is gone. It's much more mellow. So again, very important, because all of these little resonances that build up, once you have many of them in a whole mix, it's just not going to sound clear. It's just not going to sound pleasant to the ear. Now let's have a listen to this section again without automation, without the automation in the context of the mix.
Acariciando mi ensueño, reviviendo mis ansias de estar
And with automation,
acariciando mi ensueño, reviviendo mis ansias de estar entre tus brazos.
wow, so much more engaging, so much more dramatic, and it's just a few little moves that I've drawn in with the pencil tool. Nothing crazy, but what a difference it makes in the context of the whole.
Entre tus brazos, entre tus sombras.
As a last bit, let's also have a listen at what happens when I lower the outer microphone for more intimate sound in this section. So let's compare it with this original one here first. Let's see what happens if we keep the volume at the original level, so by turning the automation off. So as you can hear, this section has just become a little bit more intimate, a little bit more direct. And again, in the context of the song, this is a small but important difference. Now let's have a listen to this section, but with everything on, even on the master bus.
Acariciando mi ensueño, reviviendo mis ansias de estar entre tus brazos, entre tus sombras.
Great, so I think the key takeaways here are that this is of course a very, very good recording, and I think the studio in Budapest enables pretty much everyone to get to this kind of quality for a few $100. And the other main takeaway is that if the recording is so good, very little has to be done, and indeed you have to be very careful not to overdo something in the mix. The last thing you want is have a great recording ruined by too much processing, and I hear this a lot. I hear this in many, many mixes that I review, that good recordings are just simply destroyed by too much EQ, too much compression, too much this and that. It's just simply not necessary. So here my approach was to really preserve what has been recorded, and if I can, enhance it as much as possible, whether it's through a little bit of EQ or a little bit of automation here and there. Okay, so I hope this video was helpful to you guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and feel free to join my private Facebook group Mixing with Martin as well, where I do weekly Q&As exclusive to my group, and I also share exclusive content. I'll be seeing you in the next video, and until then, happy mixing, take it easy, bye bye.